And we are rolling with Beth.Seed. I finally have you back. Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you for having me. It was
Oh,
great
it's
to be on last time, so I'm glad to be back.
it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I had kind of made a vow not to have any more survivors on my show, so I've broken it for you. But I want to explain to people why. One of the main reasons I don't like dealing with there's a lot of infighting and a lot of different things that happen because a lot of times survivors and victims will trigger each other, and so it just makes it gets old after a while, so I kind of let it go. But the reason I have no problems having you on is one of the things that I've realized about your particular cult or church or whatever you want to call it that you came out of is that everyone gets along. They're all like in agreement, and there's no infighting. You're not triggering each other. It's actually quite amazing, and y'all are very well adjusted, and it's really refreshing. And so I really admire that whatever it is that the Plymouth Brethren are doing that is bad, they also are creating such an army of people who are like done with them, and they are like looking at the highest high to get rid of it rather than having all the infighting, including people who, like for you, for instance, are still a Christian person. And
Yes.
then there's other ones who are not. They don't
Yep.
want to have anything to do with it. And you guys still get along so great. So that's why, if anybody's wondering, that's my answer, and I'm sticking to it. But I was listening to you on Blackballed, which is also a really great channel. I like how he interviews. I like everything about it. And you cracked me up. I'm expecting like this really serious thing, and you start in with about, you guys happen to talk about accents in Minnesota because that's where you're from. And
Yes.
he said, "Oh God, I hate that. I hate that noise." And he's like, "Do you have a wood chipper?" And you're like, "Not as far as I'll talk about on the podcast."
Yeah.
I was just like, she thought of it so quick, and I was like, "This is what I love about Beth. You're just like, you called yourself a regular weirdo, and I thought that was just so cool. Aren't we all?"
Yes,
Um,
100%.
yeah, and so I want to start with you getting your voice because you mentioned that it was 2 years ago, but that was 2 years ago when you were interviewed. So this now 4 years ago. Um, Tell me, what was the catalyst for you finding your voice?
So it was crazy, and I always tell people, like, I first left the Brethren, and I like ran as far and fast from it as I could. And I'm not talking physically. I mean, like, in my head, I didn't talk about it. I didn't acknowledge it. It was like it just wasn't there. And it actually, I changed jobs, and I took a job that was a lot closer to where I actually grew up, and close enough that people recognized me, knew who I was. And it was a lot harder to pretend you didn't come from something or somewhere when people are recognizing you. And so I actually started really having a hard time. I was crying a lot. I was almost having like a nervous breakdown. I was just not doing so hot. And so a couple of my friends at work had actually said, really think maybe you need to talk to someone. And so I did. I actually started going to therapy. I started talking, and it made me realize that, like, I had stayed very, very afraid of the Brethren because when I first left, they pursued me very aggressively. And I think, it put me in that flight mode, and I just stayed there. And I forgot that, hey, you got out and now you have the power. And that was kind of, it took me a long, long, long time to get there, where it was, now I can start talking about it. And suddenly it, and it happened very, very quickly, where I went from like, oh my gosh, I'm literally scared to be seen in the town I grew up in, to here I am. What you gonna do? I want you to be scared of me, you know? And and it's been a very freeing feeling for me. Yes, it has been about 4.5 years since I started. Just here I am. I'm out and about living my best life, and it's been amazing. It's the best thing I could have done. But it was not an easy adjustment.
No, I can imagine. Was it cathartic
Oh,
to
so much.
finally speak?
Yes. So obviously, I mean, I had a handful of people that knew my entire backstory. And I remember when I finally put it out there, I actually finally had like put something out on Facebook, I think, about it and something. And one of my best friends, she's actually since passed away from breast cancer, but I remember getting a text from her, and she said to me, she's like, that had to feel really good, didn't it? And I was like, it really did. It's just kind of like, there now, like, I I am weird. I'm gonna own it. I'm never gonna not be weird, but I'm just doing my best. That's all I can do.
That's awesome. And so give everybody just kind of a roundabout about your life and where you come from and just the basics of the brethren.
Sure. So it's kind of complicated, and this is something that, I think is really the hard thing. I've been out now for 17 years, and the brethren have really changed in that time frame. So some of the things I'll have people say to me, well, you say they don't watch TV, but I think they do now. And it's like, yes, some of this has changed. So I like to start with that. Full disclosure, how I grew up, it has changed a little bit. But yes, I grew up in the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. I was born and raised. And so they're a pretty strict Christian. They call themselves a mainstream Christian church. I call it a Christian cult, just because it is. And I want to be very clear with people. I didn't leave thinking, oh my goodness, I'm leaving this crazy cult. I just was like, this is getting a little weird for me. I knew it just didn't feel right. Things weren't making sense to me, but it took me years to come to the realization that, hey, I think this is a cult. I think this checks a lot of the boxes of cult-like behavior. And it was kind of a bit of a wake-up call for me too, because it was like, holy cow, yeah, like that's pretty scary to not even realize you were in a cult. And it takes that long for, I say the scales to drop off your
It is
eyes,
what it is. It's the
where
truth being
suddenly you're
revealed.
seeing it a little more clearly. But I was very much raised that, you are privileged to be in the brethren, and, you are one of God's chosen people. When he comes to take us, the brethren will be taken right away ahead of other Christians, that the brethren will have a special place in heaven. And like, yes, there's other Christians in the world, and that's great and fine, but we will always be just a little bit better. And now, according to the brethren, now I am very bad because I had the privilege of being brethren and I chose to leave it. So I'm even worse than someone who was never brethren now, because I knew that privilege and I left it. So they definitely believe they are very special. I grew up with, no technology, no radio, no television, no computers, no cell phones. I went to public school for just a couple of years, kindergarten, first and second grade, I think it was. And then it was just like a small brethren school. And I did that from 3rd to 8th grade. And then I was actually homeschooled 9th through 12th grade. So they definitely believe in isolation from the world, from worldly people. And in my opinion, that's what drives a lot of the abuse, is because they do cut their members off so hugely from outside influences. There's a real lack of education about, normal behaviors and how, and I know I shouldn't use the term normal behaviors, because what's a normal behavior? I hate to say the word normal. Um, but just how to treat people, how men should treat women, that women aren't a second species, you know what I mean? Like, and that's kind of how they act.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's kind of the Brethren in a nutshell. Men are very much the more important. Women are the second string by a long shot. And yeah, no technology, very isolated. You couldn't eat or drink with anyone that was quote unquote worldly, or of the world. So yeah, that was kind of how they rolled. So
Wow. And so how old were you when you went, something's off? Even though I know you said that when you got out, you still hadn't completely understood the gravity of the abuse that you had endured, which I would bet would give you some compassion towards people who are still in it, understanding there really are scales, like it's a thing.
oh, 100%. So I was about 19, and there was just a variety of things going on, and that's long stories. I'm not going to bore everybody with all the details of it, but there was just a lot of different things happening on a local level. The Brethren are a worldwide cult, but just right in my own little local church, there was just things that it just didn't make sense to me, like things that are allowed for one person but not allowed for someone else, and I'd question it, and it just wasn't making sense. My friend and I witnessed kind of a nasty abuse situation, and nothing happened at all to fix it. And it was just things like this, and I was getting more and more unhappy, and feeling like there was just a lot of things that didn't make sense. And like, if we really truly are Christians, how does this line up with the Bible? And it didn't, in my mind.
Right.
And so it took me about 2 years to first get up the nerve to make the decision to leave, because I knew that leaving the Brethren is not just leaving your church. I knew I would be leaving my family.
Right.
And that's a super hard decision to make.
Of course.
And so it took me quite a while to convince myself that I was actually going to do it. And then it took time to plan, because I knew they would stop me if they possibly could. And
Get
so
get those hooks in on you.
yes. So on your point about having compassion for people that are in, I definitely do, because I mean, I pray for my family all the time that their eyes will be opened. But I also know after I left, it was probably, like I say, a couple of years after I left where, if something would go wrong in life, even just some little thing, it was, well, that's probably because I left the Brethren. Because you were literally
And that was your own
ingrained.
mind or someone else saying it?
It's someone else saying it, but
Oh.
it's like, you are so ingrained to believe everything will go wrong when you leave. Your life will fail. You will fail.
Right.
And like, you will come crawling back destitute and broken. And I remember when I did finally leave, making a promise to myself that, like, no matter what, Beth, you are not going to go back. This isn't right, and you are not going to go back. And I'm not going to lie, those first months, year, missing my family was just about unbearable.
I can imagine.
And it was just like, oh, but I just want to see them. I just want to spend time with them. But it was like every time I started to struggle, it was like God put something in my way to be like, nope, see, this is where you need to be. You're doing exactly what you should be doing. This is the time you should be doing it. And it was kind of amazing, really.
When you're so gaslit, you do kind of create two different realities, like one that you kind of know innately truth. I mean, even when you're young, you do. But then there's this piece of you that's been programmed that knows the exact structure. And sometimes people do, master things that are horrible, and they're more comfortable with what they've mastered than what they haven't. Tell us how brethren is different, because I was really amazed. Like 99% of the people, from what I understand, are born into this cult. It's not one that somebody can like go knock on the door, or
No.
they don't send out people looking to bring people in. How are they different than the average church?
So that is one thing that I have learned is a huge difference. You're right. They do not actively recruit. And in my life, I remember one family like trying to join. It's extremely rigorous, the process to like try and join the Brethren. And they did join, but I feel like they were only in the Brethren for maybe a few months before they left again, because it's a hard life. Like you are very cut off from any family that isn't in the church. And, I mean, brethren go to church all day Sunday. They go to church every single day. There's very strict rules, who you can work with, who you can socialize with. Everything is very controlled. And that control is kind of the biggest thing, in my opinion, if you are not willing to say how high when the leader says jump, it's not the place for you. And so I think that's why, they don't even bother trying, because most people just have zero desire to be that controlled. So yes, the vast majority are born into it. I am, what would it be, third generation that was, my grandpa and grandma were raised in the cult. My parents were raised in the cult. And yeah, I just didn't know anything different at all. I mean, that was just who we were.
All right. So let's say that you're 19 years old. I have an invisible cloak, and I can come with you to your church. What will make it different when I walk in? Will I notice things? Will I, tell me the kinds of things when you walk into the church?
So I think the number one thing that would shock most people if you could walk into a Brethren church, is the separation of men and women. So the actual meeting room, what I have learned normal churches call a sanctuary, is dish shaped. So it's like angled down, and the benches get progressively smaller as you get towards the center of the circle.
Right.
And the more important you are, the closer to the center you sit. So you have like in the center, the most important men, married men, and they are the most important. Then maybe the second row back, you have like less important men, probably still married. Then the third row is like single guys, because usually you have to be married. Women aren't worth anything, but yet you still have to be married to be somebody.
You got to get one of those unworthy things to be able to come into this inner circle of our concentric circle.
And then at the very outside is where the women fill in. Women and small children fill in.
Okay.
And so I think, to me, that would be the first thing that you would notice.
Okay.
That would jump out at you. The next thing that would probably stand out to you is the Brethren don't necessarily have one specific pastor that is the one ministering. Each locality has like a couple main leaders, if you will, that do a lot of it, but it could be any number of men in the locality that are the ones that are actually like reading the scriptures and leading the discussion on them, if you will. The discussion often tends to be very open, with men contributing left and right. It's not just a sermon.
Okay. So it's more like a fellowship situation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And then are the women allowed to talk at all?
The only thing women are allowed to do is at the beginning and the end of each meeting, they sing a hymn, the Brethren do. And the women have, and I laugh because I think on the Brethren website it says, of course women are important to the church. They have the honor of choosing the hymn that's sung. Yeah, they pick which hymn is going to be sung at the beginning and which hymn is going to be sung at the end. That is the sum total of what women
the things
contribute.
To live for.
Yes, that is the honor that they are given. Other than that,
well, no, that and you get to take the Brethren bus up to heaven.
Yes. Yep,
the first one off. behind the men, though, of course.
Yes,
All right,
definitely.
so I'm still in my invisible cloak, and we've sung a hymn, and the men have all chatted. Then what happens?
So it really depends on which night of the week it is, because it is different. They have different meetings depending which night of the week it is. Maybe it's Monday night, which is 100% a prayer meeting. So then it's just simply all the men are individually standing and praying. And I was very glad to be a female in those days, because I surely did not want to stand and pray out loud in front of, 50 to 90 other people. Not my idea of a good time. So I was always glad that I was a female, honestly, at that particular point in the church. But then the Tuesday night is a different thing. That's where like two men at their own will get up and they do more give a sermon. That's, other people don't contribute. But then Wednesday and Thursday nights are more the conversation. Friday night could be something different. Saturday is very wide across the board. Saturday could be an early morning meeting once a month. It's where they like give their money away. Not to anyone that isn't brethren.
Oh, okay.
But that's where they do their like charitable givings. It's usually heavily directed to give it to the leader, or a lot of it goes to the leader. And then Sundays are, they start with the Lord's Supper in the morning. Then they do a big meeting that's kind of a combination of a preaching of the gospel and then like more of a sermon type thing. And then they do preachings all afternoon. So it's a wide variety. It would depend on what night of the week you showed
Where
up.
are the children during all of this?
Attending.
Okay, so they're right there in the back rows with the women.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Boy children go down and start sitting with their dads usually at about 2 years old.
Oh.
Yep. So, and if they're misbehaving, they get taken out of meeting and a little talking to and brought back in. So, yeah.
Wow.
Other than that, yeah, it's everyone attends.
So what was the most bizarre thing that happened to you and your family?
So I would say the most bizarre thing, at the time, I don't know whether it felt as bizarre as like when I look back on it, I think, oh my word, that was insane.
Right.
So when I was 8, my dad was actually one of the local leaders in the church. And he got in trouble with the leadership. To this day, I don't 100% know what his crime was per se. But how the brethren punish people that do something wrong is you are what is called confined. And that is where you are not allowed to attend meetings, and you aren't allowed to like socialize with other brethren, but you also can't socialize with worldly people either.
Oh.
And so you're basically very isolated. You're very cut off, and you're supposed to use this time to really like think and pray and get back to being right, to get right.
How do they know if you're talking to other people in the world? Like, couldn't your mom call
Just
people?
monitoring them. Just kind of watching them, monitoring them.
Do they monitor like their phones?
Oh, I'm sure now they do. Now that technology is more out there, I'm sure they do now.
Okay.
Back then, I don't know really how they would have done it
did
other than just kind of keeping an eye on them. We were in a small town. It would be very easy to keep an eye on someone.
Okay.
So confining is kind of the first step. The next step, if you've been really bad, is you get withdrawn from. And like I am currently withdrawn from because I am very bad. Because chose to leave the brethren.
You got off the brethren bus.
And dared to talk about them. How awful. So, but anyways, my parents were one Friday night. I can remember this so vividly. Like I say, I was 8. It was April of 95. Actually March, because it was the day before April Fool's Day. And Friday night, I remember right before meeting, we had eaten supper. But right before meeting, there was a knock on the door. And I remember a couple other brethren men were there to talk to my dad. And that was not a normal thing at all. And so us kids kind of scattered, the way you do. My siblings were all older, teenagers at that point. So we were in our rooms, getting ready for meeting. And next thing I remember my mom knocking on the door, and she was standing in the hallway upstairs at our house, and she was crying, and she said, girls, Dad and I are going to be confined tonight. And of course I was 8. I did not understand. And she said, you don't have to go to meeting if you don't want. And so I decided to stay home with my sister that was closest in age to me. She was 5 years older. And my older brother and sister did go. And they came home, and sure enough, yep, my dad had been confined. But in the process, my grandpa at the meeting had apparently objected to them confining my dad. And so they ended up withdrawing from him. So I kind of, in one fell swoop, was losing my grandpa and grandma. And then there was my parents. So the brethren believe that the only right place for kids is with the brethren.
Of course.
So my parents were confined, but it was recommended as kids go and stay with other brethren families. So my brother and I, the very next day, April 1st, were sent to live with my uncle and aunt. And they had 2 children still living at home. And my one sister went to live with another brethren family that wasn't related to us at all.
Wow.
And then my oldest sister went to live with another older married cousin. They had some little kids.
How terrifying.
It was actually awful.
I mean, I honestly can't imagine it. This is so trite, but I remember my parents going to Europe for 2 weeks, and I loved my cousin and my aunt, and I was devastated. I had to stay there for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, I can't even fathom knowing that you're like gonna just live there indefinitely.
Well, so that was the thing when on Saturday, when the priests came to pick us up and take us to these various homes, of course, I was a little girl. And I said to the one priest, I said, how long do you think this will be? Like, how long will I be away?
What a smart little girl.
And, I don't think he liked me very much by the end of this whole thing. Because I asked him this question many times over the next years. He said to me, I don't think, maybe a week, Beth. It might not even be a week. And I was like, I can handle a week.
Yeah.
Easy peasy. No problem. So I remember my mom had helped us like pack our bags and, told me to take things I needed. Well, I was still a little girl that slept with a blanket, your special blanket at night. And I remember I didn't pack it because, it's only going to be a week. I can live without my blanket for a week. And the next day was Sunday. And Sundays are a day when like a variety of localities will get together for a meeting. So that particular Sunday, we were actually in Winnipeg, which is about an hour away. And I remember when we got back, there was a box sitting outside my uncle and aunt's door, and it was from my mom. And there was a note that said, these are a few more things that I thought Beth would need. And my blanket was in there. And I was glad to have it. But again, I'm a big girl now. I don't need this for a week. Well, a week was 3 years and 3 months by the time.
Oh my gosh. 8
and I asked
10 and a half, 11.
I was I was 11 and a half.
Wow.
Yep. So, because I was a few months shy of my 9th birthday when it happened. And I was just a few months shy of my 12th birthday when they got back. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Actually, days short of my 12th birthday. That's what it was. It was like a week away. And I asked that one priest, by the way, on a just about weekly basis, is this the week my dad and mom will be able to come back to the brethren? So like I say, I don't think he liked me very much, but the thing is, no matter what, like you say, no matter how close you are, staying with someone
Oh,
indefinitely. And I did tell my parents this like years later. I wrote them a letter. And I just said this was the singularly most awful time in my life. It changed the very fabric of who I am.
of course it did.
Um, and I said, the only right place for children with parents that can care for them and who love them is with those parents.
Amen.
It's not with someone else. And so my cousins that still lived at home were both older. Um, and the boy was about 4.5 years older than me. And it was within less than 2 months, and he was sexually abusing me. And that went on for quite a while until I got smart enough to never, ever, ever be alone. Um, and that I did not talk about at all, at all, until I was 34 years old. Nobody knew about that. It was one of those things that you know in your heart that this wasn't my fault, but
Yes.
you are still that 8-year-old girl that says something I did caused this. And it's very hard to not feel ashamed
Of course.
and dirty.
Satan puts that right there.
Yeah. And so I just, it was something I did not talk about, think about, acknowledge.
Were
But
you threatened, like, do not tell anyone, or
oh, yes.
I'll do something horrible
Yes.
to you or your
Yeah.
family members, or I'll burn
Yeah.
your blankie, or I don't know.
Yeah. 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 For sure. Yeah.
All right. So
And
as a kid, if somebody's telling you don't tell anyone, um, do you know at some level they're gonna deny it anyway?
yes.
Or like what are your thoughts on that?
Well, so I've had therapy and I can analyze it a lot, and I remember my therapist saying to me, he's like, it's a lot easier to look at this from a 34, 35 year
Mhm.
old's perspective. He's like, your brain is fully developed at 8 years old, at 9 years old, 10 years old. Your brain is not fully developed. You're not processing all these things. But yes, I had two things, in my opinion, that were working hard against me. One, of course, I was terrified because, oh my goodness, you're going to hurt me or someone if I tell anyone. And then, yeah, who am I going to tell? His dad and mom? Why would they
Mhm.
believe me over
Right,
their own child?
right.
I didn't even have my own parents to tell. And years later, when I did finally tell my parents, um, shockingly, I mean, I was pleasantly surprised. They absolutely believed me 100% right off the bat, um, which was amazing, honestly. I was very touched that they did. And I'll get back to that in a second. But I remember right shortly after it happened, my mom had told me that she was going through like old school work. And the Mother's Day after they had been confined, so that would have been a month and a half, she had found a paper that I had written. Obviously, it was something kids were supposed to write the things they loved most about their mom. And I had written it and mailed it to her because obviously I couldn't see her. And it started with, I love my mom because she keeps me safe. And my mom was absolutely devastated years later then to realize that at that time I probably wasn't feeling very safe at all.
No.
Um, and so I will always be grateful. They very much believe me. And actually, shockingly, my abuser, I say shockingly, but it's disturbing to me. When he was confronted about it by the local priests, he actually asked to meet with my mom and dad. This would be his uncle and aunt. and went over to their house and proceeded to tell them everything that he had done to me.
In front of you?
Oh, thank God, no. No. Oh, heavens, no. My mom told me this after the fact, because at that time she still talked to me on the phone occasionally. Oh, no, I
I
could
don't know
not.
how your mom could sit there and listen to it. Oh
I
my
actually
God.
asked her, I said, how did you and dad listen to this? And she's like, not well.
I'm sure it
Um,
knocks you off center too. It's so out of the left field.
well, and I'm like,
Although
why would
that was
he?
one of my questions though. You know, there's certain sects of things like, the Catholic priests are, famous for being, into children, and the Mormons are kind of famous for doing some weird things behind veils. And, I know that the Brethren is, kind of famous for like the way they control money and the way that they make everyone work in the business. But do you think that somewhere inside your mom kind of knew?
I don't know. But I also feel like, she probably also knew there's not a lot she can do
Right.
because he's a man. And in the Brethren, he's always going to be more valuable. And her opinion that this shouldn't have happened to her child, well, it's horrible and awful. I was still just a girl.
Right.
So,
And
but
does it go outside of law? Like, is that part of the deal? Like, you can never bring something to the police or
oh, yeah, no, they don't. They rarely, they have zero respect for law enforcement. And I mean, I've heard a lot of stories of them trying to buy off law enforcement, if they have gotten in trouble for certain things. But in my case, I did actually speak to a local law enforcement officer, but because it had been so long, I would have had to completely testify and talk about everything. And I'm not saying I will never get to a point where I could do that, but I just at that point I definitely couldn't.
yeah.
Um
I mean, it was so new. Um,
yes.
wow. And so gosh, my heart is just broken because of how on an island on your own you were.
Well, and that's, I look back and I remember like I used any excuse I could, to be at a friend's house or even to go with my brother. He was 8 years older than me and had very little time for an annoying little sister. And he had his own struggles because he didn't have parents to speak of either. I can look back and honestly say he was going through a pretty tough time in his life too. And I certainly wasn't going to talk to him about that, or anything that was going on. Um, but I remember one time him almost catching us. Um, and afterwards thinking, oh, I wish he would have. I wish he would have seen something because
Right. Right.
it
You
would
would
have
have proof,
changed.
tangible proof.
Yes. Yes.
Well, it's
Um,
interesting because, like, of course, I know you because of Cheryl Hope and the Get a Life podcast, and they really focus on the cult.
yes.
Um, but a lot of them have been sexually abused,
Oh, it's so much. And
so it's very prominent.
oh, it's severe. It's a huge problem. And for me, so at the time, I had told my parents I knew that my abuser had abused for sure at least two other girls, possibly more. And they very much wanted me to give those names. I mean, I was pressured very hard and I had just
Tell
said,
us the other names of the girls on the outer circle that we need to put some tape on their mouth.
and I was like, not in a million years. Look at me. It took me, 20 years to get to a point where I can talk about this. I am certainly not going to force some other girl to start thinking about this just because you want what I don't even know what. So I think that was my experience that I know there was those other ones, but also after I did the Get a Life podcast, and I was very honest about what had happened. I cannot even tell you the floods of women that reached out to me. I mean, there was plenty that weren't brethren too, which is also sad, but there
Yeah.
was a lot of brethren, like ex-brethren, that reached out and, yep, they'd had this experience. Yep, they'd had this experience. And it was honestly, I would say almost 100% every female I knew that was ex-brethren had had something like this. And it's like, this is so awful. But I think there is no education.
Right,
You
right.
know,
That
they
was my
don't
next question. If
they don't believe in any sort of sex education at all. And I'm not saying, you know, maybe that's not the end all be all, but you still have to educate your children in some way of what is appropriate behavior.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, eh, there is no education on appropriate behavior. There's no education on how men should treat women, you know, that they aren't just objects, you know, and that's sad too. They have a very real lack of respect
Right.
for women, in my opinion.
Man, and it's so interesting because it really, when you think about how a system is built, and it seems as though John Nelson Darby, who's kind of like the father of, even though Brethren existed before that, he was the one that catapulted it. He was the one that brought in the dispensationalism. He was the one that brought in rapture. Um, and it's funny because, kind of studying for this, I found this one video that had exposing John Nelson Darby, and it's on a gentleman's YouTube uh, by the name of Jeff Swayze with two E's at the end.
Okay.
And do you know who that
I
is?
don't.
Oh,
No.
okay.
No, I'm
So
interested now.
there was two quotes. Like it's about 30 minutes long, but there were two quotes that he put up that I thought were really worth sharing. And one of them is by Charles Spurgeon. It says, "The Plymouth Brethren have no feeling wherever their principles are concerned. I know indeed of no sect or denomination so utterly devoid of kindness of heart. It is the most selfish religious system with which I am acquainted. It is entirely wrapped up in itself."
Oh my goodness, this could not be more accurate. It
Have you heard
is.
that before?
Do you know the crazy thing? Just not very long ago, I mean, I want to say it was within the last few months, a friend of mine, her dad was talking to me about different dealings he's had with the brethren. And he said, you know what I've learned about them? There is nothing they do that doesn't benefit them in some way.
It's like a narcissist.
Yes. He's like, even if it seems like they're doing something nice for you, there's a benefit to them in some way.
Right.
And it really struck me. Like, I remember being like, oh my goodness. So this is someone that, I mean, he didn't grow up around the brethren. I mean, it's not like me where I feel like I see a lot more of the inner workings. No, but this is what he has witnessed in his dealings with them. And I thought it was, yes, it is very narcissistic. It is.
Yeah. And so the other one was by a gentleman by the name of Vern S. Poitras. I don't know how to say his name. It says Darby's contribution may have started with zeal for Christ, but it ended with an indiscriminate rejection of everyone out of conformity with his ideas.
And that has stuck from, John Darby to Frederick Raven to, then there was the Taylors, Jim Taylor, senior and junior, on down to Jim Symington, John Hales, and Bruce Hales. They all follow right in there with that whole, if you do not agree with them, you're wrong.
Right.
If you question them, you're wrong. There is no room for discussion. It is their way and their belief. That's it. And I just don't think that's realistic. I don't think that is real. And oh, by the way, they also refer to their leader as like the Paul of our time, the elect vessel. They consider him the Apostle Paul. So, and I remember I've mentioned this different times. So I happen to have an uncle and an aunt that are out. They're my only family that are out of the Brethren as well. And I remember telling my uncle about my grandpa, so his father. I remember him, he was old at that time. You know, he was probably, I don't know, in his 80s for sure. Having a real argument with my mom because he was telling my mom that he believed that Paul, meaning the leader of the Brethren, could fail. And my mom was absolutely adamant that he could not fail. And I remember my grandpa just saying, I fear for your soul, because he is a man and he can fail. And of course, I was probably a teenager at this point. I feel like I was still in school because I remember being at the, lunch table. It was just my dad and mom and me, and my mom telling my dad about this. And she's like, oh my goodness, I just worry that he's going to die out of fellowship, because he's going to say something like this and essentially get kicked out for saying something like this. And he didn't. He died in the Brethren. I will always question how much my grandpa really believed in the Brethren at the end. But I think he also knew if in his 80s he left the Brethren, he'd be leaving all his children, his grandchildren, everything. And that's just a very, very hard thing to do. But
Yeah.
I just thought it was interesting.
So incestuous.
Yes.
Then everybody that chooses to leave is leaving their family. Sorry, I
Yes.
had a coughing attack. So I'm going to name some things that are like kind of a checklist of cult traits. And I want you to just tell me what kind of your first thoughts are based on it. Unquestioned authority.
Oh, yes. Well, this goes back to do not question Bruce Hales or off with your head. And that has been proven time and time again.
And that was your local chapter?
Nope. Bruce Hales is the worldwide leader of the Brethren right now.
Where is he?
Sydney, Australia.
Okay.
You can Google him. He will come up if you Google him.
Global.
Yep, it is global. And Bruce Hales is the
Canada and UK and the US.
So it's Australia, New Zealand, the UK, Sweden, Denmark, South America, the Caribbean islands, Canada, the US. I'm probably forgetting a bunch of places. I feel like there's like France and Germany, Switzerland, a lot of European countries have Brethren as well.
Okay.
Yeah. The heavy concentrated populations, I feel like, are in New Zealand and Australia, but there's a lot, scattered around. I think it's about 50, 60,000 worldwide, give or take.
And do they move around, or you kind of stay where you are?
Some, like not too long before I left, there was a real movement for, again, England there's a heavy concentration there. And so it's very easy for people to move from England to Canada. And so there was a real push for people to move from England to Canada to support like smaller localities. So they did that. When I was younger, there was a lot in South Africa, and then it was deemed that it was too dangerous.
Okay.
And so they were forced to move. And I think there was a lot that actually left the Brethren at that time because they weren't willing to leave. They weren't willing to leave their home, and I'm the first one to say, I mean, if you told me, Brethren leaders telling you got to pick up and move to South America, I probably would be like, nope, sorry, I'm going to stay here.
Yeah.
Good talk,
I get it. Does it create, so Kathy brought up this question, with no new recruits, wouldn't they quickly become inbred? Do they marry from other sects? And that's why I was kind of asking about that.
No, there is no other sects. It is what it is. You are marrying in the Brethren. There wasn't a lot of issues with it. I mean, there was a couple localities that had a little, some cousins marrying cousins. But like, I remember like Barbados, for example, like nobody in Barbados could marry someone from Barbados because they were all related to each other.
Got
So
it.
they basically had to marry someone from another part of the world. But, when you think about worldwide, I mean, there was quite a variety, if you will. It didn't take very long to get fairly far removed from your family or completely removed. So it wasn't a huge issue when I was still in the Brethren.
Okay. What the next one is mind altering practices, chanting, meditation, sleep deprivation, any kind of deprivation.
So I don't remember that being a huge thing with the Brethren. They didn't do a lot of that. It was more just the constant, you know, like I had mentioned about, you are really taught certain things and they are drilled into you. If you choose to leave the Brethren, this is what will happen.
The type of
And
chanting.
yes, and every morning you should get up in the morning and look in the mirror and say, "Oh, wretched man that I am."
Oh my
That
goodness.
that kind of thing. But that was pretty much, they really didn't have a lot of other strict things.
So what
So
do you
yeah,
say to yourself now in the mirror? Did you come up
I
with a new
don't
one?
I don't really talk to myself in the mirror right now. Usually just say, "Oh, great, another gray hair." So
Okay, so strict control over their lives, relationships, jobs, living arrangements.
100%, all of the above. You need to work for other brethren. That is not a question. Relationships are controlled. Bruce Hales actually has to approve your marriage. So if you meet a girl, they have special meetings like every month, and people travel around to different places, and that's kind of how they meet each other.
Got it.
And so you meet a girl and decide you really, really like her, and you send a message to Bruce Hales, that you want to marry this girl. If he says no, you're not marrying her. The end. Move on. And it
How
is,
many are there worldwide? He has time to answer all this mail?
well, I'm pretty sure that his sons are pretty involved in helping out with a lot of this stuff too. So
Okay, so he's got like a
yeah,
team.
and as far as living, so you have to live at home until you get married. So, which to me just sounds terrible. Right here locally, there's a couple girls that still live at home with their parents. One of them is, I think, 47 and one is 38.
Wow.
That sounds terrible. I mean, if you want to, good for you, but like, that you have to,
Right.
they don't believe in, apartment buildings, townhomes. You can't share a residence like with worldly people. So you have to have like single family homes. Um,
Interesting.
it was always a question of mine, how in the world do you afford it? Like in places like San Francisco, where how do you afford a home there?
Right, right.
And women aren't supposed to work outside the home. So on one income, it's crazy.
It's very old school. And so, the
Yes.
use of guilt and manipulation to control members.
Yes, absolutely. Again, this comes down all the way, there's Bruce Hales, then there's usually like worldwide, there's kind of a second tier of like pretty good priests. And then, there's your local priests. And it is very much a thing of like, if you're not doing enough for the brethren, if you're not supporting the brethren enough, if you're not contributing enough, you're demoted. Essentially, you're going to move down. You're less special than you were before.
Do they walk into the church in order?
So no, they don't. But
You're gonna be last because you gave the least amount of money and your daughter had to move out,
well, so I actually kind of was joking with someone else, that a former Brethren member, that like it was so funny. You'd have someone that like wasn't quite important enough to be in the front row, and so they were like in the second row or something, and the day that they finally got like the nod to come down and sit in the front
Oh,
row, and that's
Lord.
literally how it went. It was like,
Sit
no,
by
you
God.
nod to come. It was like, oh yeah.
All right, the group think and, like the flying monkeys, trying to swarm around and make people do things.
Absolutely. And love bombing, I think fits right into that category of, absolutely. Like if we all tell you that this is the best possible thing, how could you think anything else? And this is, the night before I actually left the Brethren. I got home from work, and my one brother, one of my sisters, my dad, mom, were sitting there because they could obviously tell that I was not happy. And it was very much, do you need a little medicine? Do you want to go to Australia for some encouragement? I didn't, by the way, want to go. But it is very much, but this is what we're being told. Can't you see this is right? And you're just supposed to eat it up.
Right. Isolation from family and friends outside the group.
Here we are. Yes. So interestingly enough, when I first left the Brethren, I talked to my mom on about a weekly basis. And it was not until I started questioning the Brethren to her
Got it.
that contact was cut off. And now I have no contact with any of my family that is in.
I'm so sorry. That is horrifying.
Yeah, it sucks. I have nieces and nephews I've never met, and it's hard. It's very hard. And I always
check on you like Auntie Carmen.
Please do.
Checking in on you, Beth.
Yes.
I drive my nieces and nephews crazy. I call them all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so us versus them mentality.
Oh, yes. This, again, falls into we have a special place in heaven. We are special. And like, we can't eat with them. We can't drink with them because they are unclean. They are not us. They are not as special as us. They are not as privileged as us. We have been put in this position and we are better.
It's interesting that one of the things I learned when I was checking into this whole deal, Plymouth Brethren, Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, and the Jesuits, and one other one all started around the same time period.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was really, it was almost as if somebody had kind of planned it,
Yes.
Or it just was ripe for, the timing.
For change.
Who knows? But I had never realized that. And so I thought that was really interesting. Okay. Apocalyptic or doomsday beliefs.
Yes. The Brethren absolutely believe, the rapture is coming. That is their thing. And they have predicted it multiple times and they have been wrong multiple times. I like to conveniently remind them, the Bible is pretty clear. We know not the day nor the time. But they are pretty adamant that they know. They don't really prepare other than, being them, because that's really all they need to do. So, but they do try and predict when it will be.
Doomsday stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and it's so interesting to me because I didn't even realize that the dispensationalism didn't even exist before. I always thought it was a constant, I thought Christians have been fighting about it forever, but I didn't realize that it was made up basically by him.
Yep. Yeah.
And then really taken to town on all of the stuff through Cyrus Scofield, who wrote the Scofield Bible.
Yeah.
And he was one of Darby's students.
Yes.
Crazy. Yes. It's also incestuous.
It is.
And Moody and John Nelson Darby didn't like each other one bit.
Interesting.
Yeah. I'm sure, if you don't agree with them, that's what happens.
Yep.
All right. Demands of time, energy, and financial commitment.
All of the above. All of the above. They do. They take a ton of your time. And I happen to see, where our small business is located. I see these vans go by once in the morning, once at night. It's these 3 women, driving these vans, taking school kids to the Brethren school. And it is, again, a commitment of time, and yet it is supposed to be a gift. You are blessed to be able to do this.
You're so lucky to give me your time.
So lucky. And all your money too.
Yes. It's so funny because Satan really does, his signature's all over everything. If you really look, you see it. And it's the same thing, like, all the Daystar stuff and all of these like mega churches, they're all using the same basic formula.
Well, and I mean, to me, the Brethren did not used to be so money driven as they are, in the last, ever since Bruce Hales took over, basically. Like, that's when they became so money driven. And you look at the corruption around it. I mean, I think I read an article like worldwide, the Brethren are worth like $65 billion. That's a huge amount for a group of about 50 to 60,000 people. I mean,
imagine if you guys just split that all up.
Right? Yeah, one of my friends jokingly
I'll go
was
back
like,
in until we divvy up the money, and then
one of my friends jokingly was like, geez, you should go back and just like get your piece of it. And I'm like, I don't think it works that way.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you look, the wealth is very concentrated in the leadership, because they want the money.
Right, of course. And that's exactly the way it is here.
Yeah.
Dallas is falling down. Like, all the churches are falling down because everyone's being exposed. I'm here for it.
Yep.
So Kathy Lucky asked, dress code or distinguishing clothes or head covers?
Yes.
Oh, there are.
All of the above.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yes, very much. So men have to have short hair, no facial hair at all. And the men are a little less conspicuous, but my husband laughs at me because he said I can pick them out a mile away, and I usually can. It is very rare that I cannot pick out a Brethren man. There's a look. I don't know what it is. For the women, have to wear a head covering. We called it a scarf. During the day, I usually just wore like a very thin band, but to meetings, I wore a big full scarf that, covered from here and was to about here. It was big, not a bonnet, but it was a big scarf. Women can only wear skirts.
And they're probably down to the ground.
They varied. It depended on the style. The highest they ever went was to the knee, but they might be as low as to the ground. They could be a little more stylish, in that way. It wasn't like the dresses necessarily. Right. Arms, you could not have sleeveless shirts to meeting. We could wear sleeveless shirts outside of meeting, but in meeting, we also had to wear, like, when you were a little girl, you had to wear tights. When you were 12 years old and up, women had to wear pantyhose. And let me tell you, I have not worn a pair of those since I left the Brethren.
Kidding. I don't blame you. Gosh, I used to hate those. I'm so glad they went out of style.
Oh my gosh, they were awful.
Pantyhose.
Yes.
Okay, so the use of specialized language or cult speak.
Oh, yes. I think I
took some of the words.
Well, I feel like I did a TikTok a while ago where I talked about a lot of the words that they have, and I wish I could remember some of them now, but confined, withdrawn from, elect vessel, that's their leader, he's their elect vessel. I'm trying to think of some of the other,
just in meeting,
well, in meeting, I mean those are usually used in meeting, but I'm trying to think. I had a list at one point.
Yeah. Well, check out her TikTok. Can you tell everybody what your TikTok is?
At Beth.Seed 86. Right? Yes, at Beth.Seed 86. Geez, I had to think about it for a second. Yes.
I'm just going with it. I will make sure it's correct in the description box.
Yeah, I do have a ton of TikToks. I haven't done any new ones in a while, and I need to do that. I go in spurts where, I'm very motivated, and then all of a sudden it's like,
it is a job.
What's the point? It's a drain sometimes. And I also sometimes am like, I gave this 21 years of my life. I'm not giving it anymore. But with that said, then I think about the ones that are trapped in there.
Say, you're really doing a service. Because I know just hosting people, I get emails thanking me, and it was so refreshing to hear her viewpoint, or it was so nice to see somebody healed, or
yes,
whatever the aspect is, it is, we really all are here together. We are the body of Christ.
Yes, absolutely.
We really should do it for each other.
Yes, exactly.
No humor or limited ability to take criticism.
So two very different things. They can joke about things, but as far as taking criticism, about the church itself, that is wicked, that is wrong, that is bad. That is why they consider me an apostate.
You little wicked one.
I am wicked. I am talking against them. So no, criticism of the church
Okay,
absolutely
we've
are.
already I just realized that we went over an hour and there's 5 more. Do you wanna finish them, or we'll just maybe catch up some other
We
time?
might have to catch up another time because I'm
Okay.
kind of running short
Yeah,
on
yeah.
time,
No,
but
that's
no.
fine. Thank you so much for your time. If you could tell everybody where they could find you, and of course, I will write it in the description box as well.
Yes, I'm on Facebook, Beth.Seed, and then TikTok is kind of my main thing. So at Beth.Seed 86. If you still have TikTok, so
And then one last
I do
thing.
try and share them on Facebook too. So and it's public. So yeah.
What words of encouragement do you have to somebody that's thinking about going public and sharing their story?
So I would just say be brave. You got this. You've already come this far and you've survived this much. And I saw a quote quite a few years ago that is the one that I stick with a lot, and it is you have already survived 100% of your worst days. And you never know what thing you are saying that does encourage somebody else.
It could be a
Sometimes we
life.
all, even if you can look at someone and think they have it so together,
Mhm.
but we all need encouragement. So that's all
Amen.
I have to say.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And
Thank you so much
thanks
for having me
everyone for
on.
being here. And please share it with people because one, people should know about this horrible cult. Not
Yes.
that they can get involved unless they really work hard. Um, but two, I mean, people really do need the courage and the bravery to move forward and to keep on rolling and to get involved and like make friends and just get
Yes.
back out there in life.
Yes.
All
Well,
right.
thank you so much. You
Yes, my
take care.
pleasure. We'll talk to you later, Beth.
Yes. Bye bye.